Rose Miller, a World War II flight nurse, attended the Society of Air Force Nurses National Convention in 2005. She shared some of her experiences from that exciting time 65 years ago.
This is Rose Miller, and she served in World War II in the Army Air Force's Nurse Corps.
Right.
And she's going to answer a few questions today. First of all, Rose, what I would like you to do is summarize a little bit of your history in the Army Air Forces, when you came in, why you came in, what you did, and what caused you to get out.
Okay. Well, when I entered the service, I was assigned to Atlantic City, and we had about 250,000 troops in Atlantic City. They had taken over all the hotels up and down the boardwalk. They turned one of the hotels into a hospital. And I served in the hospital until I was sent to flight training. And I think we had just about everything under the sun. We went through a meningitis epidemic. Well, it wasn't really an epidemic, but it was bad enough. And we say we lost about 5. These we could not save. No way. They were failed. But we saved the rest of them. And when we were picking them up, because we knew exactly what we were looking for. And with the penicillin, we didn't even have penicillin at that time. We had the sulfa drugs. And sulfadiazine saved so many of them. And there, I was sent to flight training in Bowman Field. And we were there about 6 weeks. And from there, we graduated our class in August of 43. And we were sent overseas. We were sent to Hickam Field. Nobody knew where we were going, so instead of, they issued us Arctic clothing to fool the Japs. So of course, by the time we kept our Arctic clothing for a long, long time until toward the end of the war, they asked us to turn it all in. They kept us there. Well, we were there close to 6 months because Admiral Nimitz said, there's no place in air evacuation in this war. Well, we proved him wrong. And we sat almost for 6 months, and all we did was fly inter-island around. The first long flight, we had to go down to Canton Island to bring back the crew of a plane that, as it was taking off, hit a bunker and blew. And we had to bring these burned cases back. So, of course, 2 of us went down. We flew down, and it's usually about 8 hours down. We picked them up, and they were all bandaged from here on up. Now, they did such a wonderful job at Canton Island that when these boys recovered, all they had was maybe a couple of scars on their face. So right after that, in fact, that particular day we were sent up on a bivouac. We were up there about a week when we saw, I think it was 5 LSTs ready for loading. When they blew, we were way up on the top, way up above Pearl Harbor when we saw them go. So they delayed the action. They were ready to invade the Yap Islands and then go on from there, but they delayed that and went right on to Saipan right after that. I think it was sometime in May when they decided to go on to Saipan. So they decided they would break us up. We were 24 nurses plus the chief nurse. There were 6 in a flight with flight leader. They sent one flight down all the way to New Guinea, another one to Guadalcanal, they sent one flight on the other way into Kwajalein, Tarawa and Kwajalein, and then the 4th flight took the States around. And in 3 months, we were rotated. Oh, there was kind of funny stories coming out of them. Now, out of every plane load of patients coming up from the South Pacific, we had to have 5 psychos. When they took an island down in the South Pacific, and they had it secured, they stayed there, and another group went into another island. So these poor fellows got stuck with nothing to do. So they went stir crazy. Well, I'm evacuating 5 of them, and one decided that while he was on the plane, he had to use the latrine. Well, he came out and went streaking up and down the plane. Now, there's a peculiar story that came out of New Guinea. Now, to this day, I don't know who evacuated him, because there were at least 3 flight nurses. There was a story about this boy in New Guinea who saw ducks. They tried everything. They finally sent him back to duty, and he still had his ducks, and so they decided to send him back to the States. Now, the flights were long. The flights from New Guinea to Guadalcanal. From Guadalcanal to Canton Island is 8 hours. Another 8 hours to Hickam Field. Another 14 hours to the States. Well, one day, 1 hour out of San Francisco, he calls the flight nurse over and says, "Lieutenant, you can have the ducks now. I don't need them anymore." But some of the things that we evacuated, out of every flight, each one of us had different experiences, different patients, different things. We evacuated, well, I helped them when we had like a service hospital on the line. So when the patients came in, we could take care of them before they went out again. They were evacuating jungle rot. It was just almost like this bacterial infection that was hitting a lot of people up here. But let me tell you, it was worse. How these nurses was able to manage the smell was unbelievable, because when we took care of them on the line, redressed them, it was unbelievable. Unbelievable. This is what we were evacuating. They couldn't send them out by ship. They would never have made it back. They would never have made it back by ship. When we evacuated Saipan, the hospital ships would go in, pick up all the sick and wounded. They would land at Kwajalein. They would unload about 1,500 out of the hospital ship in Kwajalein. And we took them all back to Hickam Field in less than a week. If they went by ship, it would have been 3 weeks in and 3 weeks back. And we had them all out. We had them all back in a week. I think that the flight nurses suffered more from the flying than we did anywhere else. We were flying at sustained periods of time, not 4 hours and rest. We were doing 20 hours at a clip. And we would come off shaking. We weren't able to eat. We couldn't sleep. And one of the flights almost cracked up. They flew more combat. They flew more hours. That one flight flew more hours than the combat pilots did in 6 weeks. And then, well, One of the girls said that she couldn't take it anymore. She said she's going back, so she asked for a transfer out. Another one, I think she finally turns to drugs.
What kind of drugs?
I don't remember. All we had was morphine. They were the small syrettes, the needle on the end, and that was it, you know. But she got out of it, and she was okay. But I mean, the pressures that we were under were constant. Because if anything happened to the plane and you went down in the drink, you were finished. While we were there, General Harmon was leaving Hawaii, and he was going to Saipan with his crew. The plane went down in the Pacific, and to this day they couldn't find him. So stop and think, if any one of us went down, we were finished altogether. Yet we didn't think about it. We didn't think about it. And half the time we would come in on 3 engines and hope to God we didn't feather another prop. And yet we never thought about it. Sometimes we had to do things that, and as far as the crew was concerned, we were the only nurse on the plane with our assistant, and that's it. Whatever happened on that plane, we were responsible for. And I picked up this flight in Guadalcanal. When I picked it up, it came from New Guinea. She says, I think you better wire ahead for a whole blood transfusion. And she told me why. The boy was suffering aplastic anemia. God knows, aplastic anemia, I'm sure he had leukemia in those days. Who knows what he had? And he was already oozing blood from his mouth. And I said, this boy needs oxygen, definitely. And all we had is a small tank like this with a mask. That's all, with a mask. We got on the plane and everything's fine. I strapped the mask on his face. He said, I have to spit. Off comes the mask. I put it back on. I have to spit. Off comes on. And instead of back and forth, I said, the devil with this. I sat there for the 8 hours, and I said to my corpsman, I said, you take care of the rest of them. Mask went on, mask went off, mask went on. When we landed at Canton Island and they gave him a transfusion there, we were down just 2 hours, just long enough to give him a transfusion, and we were off again. And he was fine. But, we landed at Hickam, and I said to my commanding officer, who didn't like me for beans, and I mean it, I said, I would suggest that we keep him on the ground and transfuse him and send him out on the next plane. Oh, I'm sorry, but he's on the manifest to go out in 4 hours. Ooh, boy. He went out in 4 hours, and they almost lost him. Now, an hour or two out of San Francisco, he started to go bad, and all they had was plasma. I don't think that boy made it, because they didn't keep him on the ground. But, I mean, the rest of it, I mean, most of the time that we were evacuating and bringing them back, they tried to stabilize them. But sometimes these poor boys, this is the first time they'd ever been on a plane. They were scared half to death. And they had to kind of sort of sympathize with what was going on. And one of the nurses always said, you're going to be okay. You're going home. You're going to be all right. And, you know, kind of sort of they would settle down, you know, and relax and take it as it came. And I would say that we brought them back. Coming back from Saipan, I wasn't on that plane. But there was one nurse, when she was coming in, the patient died on the plane. should just cut it. And we landed at this little island, Johnson Island, which is just a dot. You've heard of Johnson Island?
Mhm.
It's just a dot in the Pacific with a runway down one row, that's it. And they had no place for burial. Well, they had a body they had to take back. So when they left, and it was only another 4 hours back into Hickam Field. By the time we landed in Hickam, she had 2 bodies. They had 2 bodies to take off that plane. I guess I was fortunate. I got my patients all got back safely.
Rose, I'm going to ask you some specific questions.
Go
Also, I'm going all the way back to Aerovac training.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what that was like.
Aerovac training.
How long was it? What did you do each day?
The usual, well, I suppose. It was just almost like a refresher course more than anything else. Because this was new. None of us actually had any kind of experience in taking care of patients in the air, so it was all kind of new. And, well, that's just about it. It was almost like a refresher course. We had to review our drugs and stuff like, and I said, what drugs? We knew nothing. Like I said, we had a bunch of aspirin. We had some sedatives. Maybe we had a few stimulants. And if you were to take a look at our medical chest today and look at it from, if you looked at it from yesterday and then look at it from today, how in the name of God did they ever do anything? We didn't even take blood pressures then. I was talking to Aggie and she said, no, not until the Korean War. Sometime I think we just flew by the seat of our pants, as the expression goes. And we handled it the best we knew how. And that's it.
Tell me about, you went to Hickam Field. Tell me what your living quarters were like there.
They had to evacuate all of the dependents. So they moved this into Major's quarters. Oh yeah, it was 3 nights. There was one room that had twin beds. The master bedroom, they set us up with 4 beds. So that actually, like it was a 3-bedroom house. Nice kitchen, dining room, and living room area.
Was it a single family home or like
It was
an
a
apartment?
single family home. It was closer to the hospital. And so they get us they built us like a little divan or something, and we had dining room furniture. And of course in our rooms, all they did was give us a cot, and we put our chest in front of the bed, and that was it. But outside, and then
How many of you lived in that house?
well, we put 4 girls in the master bedroom. The other 2 bedrooms, there was 2 of us each. And then there was a maid's quarters, so that somebody used the maid's quarters too. Like the flight leader or one of those would take that. And we had, of course, we were right near the commissary, so we purchased things in the commissary, made our own meals, and we could always go across to the cafeteria in the hospital. So
How long were you in quarters between flights?
Depending upon how fast they were evacuating. But when we first got down there, we had really nothing to do, because Admiral Nimitz it was close to 6 months before they decided that they were going to utilize us.
So what did you do during that time?
We went around. We would have some drills, some exercises. Really didn't do very much, and evacuated in between, around the islands. And you know, the prettiest girl, the most beautiful girl that I'd ever seen was a Chinese girl. She was small. Of course, the sliding eyes, and her eyebrows were arched. I looked at her, her hands were the most delicate you would have seen, as though a Chinese girl had come to life. Absolutely exquisite, exquisite. Of course, God knows what she looked like as she got older. But see, the girl must have been about 19 years old. Absolutely exquisite. Someone said, "Oh, there are no beautiful girls in Hawaii." And I beg to differ with you. So we had a flight over to the Big Island, I think it was. And I said to the pilot, I said, "Come on with me. Come on with me." And we took him over to this little grocery store they had over there. And I said, "There she is. You're right." He said, "You're right." Absolutely exquisite.
Okay, a couple more questions. Just tell me about your flight crew. What made up a flight crew? How many nurses, technicians?
One nurse, one corpsman. That's it. Those going to the States, I think they had 2 nurses. Or they started out with 1, and then I think they decided 1 wasn't enough, so they put 2 nurses on later.
Okay. How many patients with 1 RN and 1
I
corpsman?
really, it's difficult because
Maybe an average.
I think we had maybe about 35, at the most 40.
So you and 1 corpsman would take care of 35 to 40 patients on what kind of plane?
C-54. We had the big 4 engines.
Okay.
Now, you see, there was a funny story that came out of that, too. When we first went over to Hickam Field, we had these big 4-engine planes. But they had an engine, one of the planes had engine trouble, so they kept it back in Hamilton Field. And one of the flight, her husband was in Hawaii, he's still over in Wheeler Field. So she says, "When you get over there, would you please call him and tell him I'm coming over?" So the chief nurse called the commanding officer, and said, "Well, when she arrives, please call me." Well, she came in 2 days later. Called the commanding officer, and he said, I'll have somebody pick her up. So he calls the husband over. He calls him in. He says, "Ray, you're going down to Hickam Field to pick up a passenger, 2nd lieutenant." "Why do I have to go down to Hickam Field to pick up a lousy 2nd lieutenant?" The commanding officer, "That's an order. That's it." The crew were alerted. So they got down to Hickam Field, and the crew disappeared, came over to our quarters, picked her up. They got down on the line, and she gets out of the car. He looks at her, and he says, "Annie, what are you doing here? Go on home."
Okay.
To this day, I remind her of it, and she says, "I don't remember at all." But when she came back, she told us what happened.
I have one last question for you. You were very close to Hickam Station Hospital. You were very close to Hickam Station Hospital.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Did you get to know the Army nurses?
No, there weren't that many over there. There weren't that many Army nurses. There weren't very many Army nurses at the hospital. It was a very small hospital. It was almost like a holding station almost.
And so you didn't meet them?
No, I don't remember any of those nurses. I mean, we were a very distinctive group. We were new. Mm-hmm. One time, they had to evacuate one of the, I'll use the word ground nurses. And she flew with us, and when she got out, she says, I don't want your job. I don't know, we didn't think anything of it. It was our job. We didn't think anything of it at all. No,
Now, when you came back with a group of patients, did you, as an RN, transport them to Tripler or over to
No,
Hickam?
No, they were, actually no. Once they got into the ambulance and they were transported, that was it. Our job was finished because our records went with them. Our job was finished.
Somebody else picked them up
That's right.
at the flight line.
That's right. They picked them up from the flight line in the ambulances, and that was it. My husband was in the Signal Corps, and I think he had just gotten back from Tarawa. And he knew all the medical personnel at the hospital. And of course, I got to know all the doctor personnel. And I guess we were going with
Why did he
So-
know? Why did he know the people at the hospital?
not the nurses, but the doctors, the MDs. And so, I mean, if we went anywhere, we always went with a group. Some of the crazy things that we would do too. And so, I was flying all around, and he went to the Palaus. And like I said, we corresponded. And, just trying to think. I had to go home. I had a flight back to the States. And one of the colonels came over with me, and he called his father, because his father was ill. And I called home. And when I called home, I found that my sister was dying. So he says, I'm sending you home on an emergency leave. So when I came back, I was gone about 3 weeks. Nobody knew where I went, but it was all legit, you know. And it was just shortly after that that my husband proposed and we were engaged. I went out on a flight. When I came back, he was going to the Palaus. And so, with correspondence, we set a date for February. And we were married on February 15th. But he had to get leave from the Palaus to come up. But I knew, I got to know the general who lived next door to me. And I was complaining to him that my husband couldn't get a leave to come up to get married. Well, somewhere along the line, my husband got his leave. And we were married in Hickam Field, in the chapel. It was the chapel near the hospital. Well, on one of my flights to the States, I couldn't get a wedding dress. So it was like a white bridesmaid's dress with a short veil.
Where did you buy it?
In San Francisco. And my matron of honor also found her dress there too. We couldn't find anything. Even San Francisco was having that trouble. But because I was just about this big, the only thing, you had to let the waistline out, and everything else was, was fine. But then he had been overseas almost 3 years, and he was due for rotation. But even in those days, there was no such thing as rotation, but it was still rotation. And actually, we were overseas already 18 months, and we were due for rotation also. But even then, we didn't know. So around April, we decided that if he was going to go back, and I was going to go back, you couldn't be, married couples didn't live together then. He would be in one end of the country and I'd be at the end. We didn't know when the war was. So we decided I would get out of the service. So I got pregnant in April. And I came back in June. My last flight was to Okinawa. We went into Okinawa on the red alerts. They were bombing Naha. We came in on red alerts. We were down 2 hours, loaded up our patients, and out.
Were you already pregnant at that time?
I was pregnant. That's when I better get out. I had begun to heave, you know. Otherwise, if I didn't, I probably would have stayed.
So you were on these flights to Okinawa.
But yes, we came back to Saipan, and that's another crazy story. While we were on Saipan, we were in these barracks. We were in the barracks. We were in the last set of barracks away from the hospital. And there's a screen door. There was a screen door in one end and a screen door in the other. I happened to go out the screen door one day, and it slammed back on my finger. It began to bother me very badly. Well, it couldn't sleep. Everybody's bedded down. 2 o'clock in the morning, I hear a door slam. There are Japs all over the place, remember. Then I heard footsteps in the gravel. And it was quiet. Then I hear footsteps in the gravel, and I hear a door slam. And I'm laying in that bed, and I can hardly breathe. I'm scared. Finally, I got up enough courage, and I said, "Prowler! Prowler!" So, of course, the lights went on. MPs came running, and they searched the place top down, inside, outside, and you name it. Couldn't find a prowler. What do you think happened? Well, everybody fell asleep finally. When we got up the next morning, the nurse across the hall from me said, I got up and went to the latrine. And when I got back, all hell broke loose. You didn't follow the sequence of sounds. She went out the door and the door slammed. She walked on the gravel. When she came back, she walked on the gravel and the door slammed. That's what I said. You know, funny incidents come out.
Yeah.
All kinds of funny
Now
incidents.
tell me about, you told me that married couples did not live together. When you were on Hickam Field and you were already married, did you live together on Hickam Field?
No. If I went over to his quarters, everybody would disappear.
He was living with other men
Yes.
and you were living with women.
Yeah. Well, you see, like for instance, they moved us out of the big quarters into what they call the bachelor quarters. It was living room, dining room, kitchen, and upstairs was one bedroom. So if my roommate was there, nobody would pay much attention, so he would come. And a couple of times, like when we were in the big house, one time he, before they moved us over, he handed me, he said, look, I want you to take my gun and keep it under your pillow, because we did have prowlers, a lot of the men. A couple of times our houses were broken into, one of the girls got hit over the head. Soldiers. Yes, soldiers. So, I mean, while we were there living in the big houses, they had all of our quarters wired so that when they couldn't come in. Once they hit the wire, the alarm would go off. But this was before they wired it.
When did you never got to live with your husband then until you left Hawaii?
I couldn't live with my husband until we got back overseas, and then he got out of the service. The war, I went back home. And he didn't get out until VJ Day. And that was in August. I had already gone home in June. And he didn't get out until, he got out Yeah, it was the end of August, or it was actually into September when he finally got home.
How did you spend the rest of your nursing career?
Hmm?
How did you spend the rest of your nursing career?
I didn't work for almost 10 years. And then I went back to work. And I decided as long as I had the children, I started to work nights. I was doing private duty at night in the hospital. And I continued working nights for almost 20 years. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody.
Where was this?
Brooklyn Jewish.
In New York.
Hmm?
New York.
Yeah, Brooklyn. When I first went down to training in Brooklyn Jewish, it was world known. We had the finest doctors you can imagine, brain surgeons and all. But then because of the area, starting to go down.
You came back. Do you feel like other nurses, civilian nurses that hadn't experienced the war, how did they feel about you and your service?
Once I went back to work, I was just another nurse. It didn't make any, because I think that most of the nurses that did go back had been in the service one way or the other. I mean, whether they were in the Navy, whether they were, whichever way they were. Most of the girls that I worked with had already been in the service, so it was just, you're just another nurse. There was no distinction almost. Just picked up where you left off and just continued.
Did you get any medals or?
Yes, we all got our which one did we get? Oh yeah. Well, I to be honest with you, I don't even remember. Don't even remember. I know we got the, gosh, I don't even, what that includes, whatever was it. We all got them. Some sort of an Air Force medal. Don't ask me. I just put them in the drawer and that was the end of it.
Do you have any advice for today's military nurses?
Yes, I think it's a wonderful career if they want to go into it. I think it's a wonderful career because the experience that they're going to be getting and the people they're going to be meeting, if they want to go on with their careers, it's going to help them a great deal. A great deal. One time where I'm living now, every now and then they may have a little, I don't know whether you'd call it senior citizens or what it is, or veterans or whatever. And we go to the school and kind of sort of tell you a little bit about yourself. And there was a Marine standing there, he was a captain. And I looked at him and I said, I shook my head. And he said, why? I said, you know, every time you boys go into something, the Army has to come in and bail you out. Well, it happened in Saipan. The Marines went in and pushed. And they pushed, and the Japs came in right around them. And the Army had to go in and bail them out. So, look, didn't want to talk to me after that.
Okay, Rose, thank you so much for your interview.
But remember, you know, we suffered more from the flying. It was unbelievable. The flights were so long, and I'll tell you the truth, there were times when they were so boring because you were sitting there for almost 8, 9, 10, 12 hours. By the time you came off, you couldn't even see. It was that word. Oh, anyway. Thanks again.
Okay.
And as far as, I'm going to have to get my daughter to write up some of these because my hands don't work anymore.
Do you have anything written?
No. No, I had my daughter do it for me.
You don't have anything written? Okay.
Nope.
Okay, well, that was an excellent series of stories. And we were stationed in Hawaii. I was the chief nurse at Hickam Hospital, and it's
Yeah.
still the same building. It's been added on to, of course,
Oh, I
but it's
figured.
still the same building that was there.
But you see, we didn't, when we brought the patients in, what they did is they set up like almost like a dispensary on the line, so that we wouldn't interfere with the hospital because we would be going in and out.
Yeah, so you didn't know where the patients went, if they went to Hickam or Tripler?
Well, if we came up from the South Pacific, some of them had to be dressed like when they like the jungle rot like that. We had to just take all these bandages off and rebandage them and pat them up again, and all of that. And so they decided that they would set up this like dispensary on the line, and we would take care of them there.
Who did that?
The whole medical, I guess the Air Force did it, rather than interfere with the hospital itself.
Okay.
And
So it was other AirVac nurses?
yeah,
Okay.
it was all they were manned. Who, if it wasn't our turn to go out, then we manned the hospital.
The hospital?
No, I'll use the word dispensary.
Okay, the dispensary that was out on the flight line?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was they just used a building,
Okay.
and that was it. And they set it up that way for us, you know, with all medical supplies and stuff like that. It'd be just like how could I put it? It wasn't even an emergency room.
Okay. Hey, you know that big dorm that was on Hickam? Do you remember a big man's dorm that had been bombed on December 7th? You don't remember that?
All I know that I could see, you could always see pock marks on them. I don't know whether they're still there or not.
On
A
lots
lot
of
of the buildings
buildings.
still have these big marks
Yeah,
on
they
them.
are. There was one big dorm that had been bombed, and several were killed inside of that dining hall there that day. And that turned into Pacific Air Force headquarters. That's what it is today.
Oh, well, I really don't know, because once it changed, when I went back there 5 years ago, I didn't have time to go to Hickam. I would have gone back to Hickam.
Where'd you go?
Well, I wanted to go back to where we spent our honeymoon. My daughter and I went, and I was
Where was that?
We went over to the Big Island.
Oh.
We went over to the Big Island, and
And you
Then we
didn't
toured-
go to Hickam?
Hmm?
And you didn't go to Hickam?
no.
Oh.
If I ever go back, I'll go back to Hickam.
Yeah.
I'll go back and take a look and see where we live.
Well, we've got a couple memorials there for military nurses now.
Oh, really?
Right at the hospital.
Well, you know, the nurses who, there were several flight nurses when they were evacuating the babies from Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them went down,
Yeah.
and her plane went down.
Yeah.
But we didn't lose any of our girls.
Okay.
They lost one over in the CBI that I know, and another in the European thing. But considering the fact that we were flying these long flights over the ocean, we didn't
Yeah.
lose anybody.
Wow. And you had no way of communicating with a doctor?
We had no
Anywhere.
communication whatsoever. If anything happened on that plane, it's up to you to take care of it.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you.